Contrast Ratios is recorded and produced at Get a Grip Studios in Toronto, Canada, in association with Get a Grip Management in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. It is financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, and special thanks go to its members, the board of directors, and its president, Matthew Thiesing. If you own or work at a lighting distribution company, NAILD is your association. We are committed to the interests and prosperity of the independent lighting distributor. Through our distributor-specific suite of lighting specialist educational programs, conventions, events, industry committees, and more, NAILD is your place to learn and serve the industry that has provided so much to all of us. Go to naild.org. Get educated, get associated. And now, here are John and Edward.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Contrast Ratios, the lighting industry's new home for awkward conversations. It's 2021, and there's a lot of stuff out there that is hot under the collar. This podcast is going to be the relief valve for these sorts of healthy conversations that we have got to be having. My name is John Arthur Wilson, and I am joined with my podcast partner, Mr. Edward Bartholomew. Edward,
how
say
you
hi
doing,
to everyone,
John?
and just how did we get here, man? What is
how
going
did we get
on?
Here? First, I want to say thank everyone for listening in, and John, I have to say, awkward conversations. What do you mean by
that? Well, awkward conversations like some of the ones you and I have been discussing on the sidelines here. I mean, I love it. There was just a piece in the IES magazine that referenced, I think the title was something like "The more things stay the same, the more things stay the same," or that was the essence
Alex
of it.
Baker.
I just summarized it in a
Alex
line.
Baker.
Yes.
Yep.
I think there's no shortage to these awkward conversations. I think when you start looking under rocks, and look, not all of them are awkward, man, but they feel good to talk about. And shoot, I know in the short time that I've learned a lot in while I've been kicking over some rocks or having rocks kicked at me sometimes.
Yeah, and I hear you. In contrast ratios, that name resonates a lot with me. And I think one of the things that works for me is that you can do as much as you can with light. But if you don't have contrast, you're not seeing diddly. You're not seeing the information you need to see. And I think that is what I hope will happen with this podcast, is that by our conversations, we will hopefully bring a contrast so that people can see the outlines, can understand some of the issues, or maybe go explore the issues even further and say, I did not know about that. Let's look into that. So I hope that through contrast ratios, we bring greater visibility to some of these issues. So, and
hey,
who are we?
I'll tell you.
Who are we, John?
Well, I tell you, I mean, I want to talk about that. Who are we? Who are we as an industry, or who do we want to be, right? What do we not want to be is sometimes an easier place to start that conversation. I'll tell you this. It's funny, man, when we picked, when contrast ratios came out as the title, I was like, man, that sounds like me and Edward got paired on the feel-good buddy cop drama that America needs right now. Are we the feel-good, the white detective and the black detective, and Edward's getting a new partner, but he doesn't want a new partner, and then
getting too old for this shit.
Yeah, exactly. And listen, what genuinely made me excited about it is I was like, number one, everybody loves a feel-good movie. At first, I was like, that's a little, feels like a buddy cop film. But then I was like, man, number one, that's a place that makes people comfortable, and you got to be comfortable just to listen to some of these conversations, right? And so that's kind of one of the cool things about podcasts is that you get to be a part of the conversation, you get to listen in on the conversation, and when you're talking about when it's awkward conversations, sometimes, people get heated. It's easier. What we see in social media, the way people throw stuff up, the way that dialogue happens. That's something I have a visceral, reaction against. Why I have a pretty minimal online footprint. But I love this idea of, hey, let's dedicate 30, 40 minutes and let's talk about a topic that, let's bring some guests on and let's talk about some stuff and, represent a lot of points of view and disagree with each other in the process.
So it's a safe space for having these type of conversations. I love it. So let's tell the folks who we are. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, my name is John Wilson. I mentioned that. 15 years doing utility and lighting work. I just recently left the public sector, started my own business. It's been a phenomenal year. And man, I'll tell you, Edward, it was one of those things. I put it up. I was just like, universe, help me pick a path because I'm not good at picking one for
Mhm.
myself. I say yes to everything. And man, it was awesome. It was like I got this utility background, but man, the lighting, all my lighting connections came out. You know, it was incredible. The show of support I got, and next thing I knew, all my business was coming from the lighting industry or working for utilities specifically to engage with the lighting industry. It was awesome, man. So I don't want to say I don't want to say born again, but it definitely felt like a cool, renewed sense of purpose. Kind of as I shift
Mhm.
as I shift in. So my company's called Fernhill Shopworks, working here out of Portland, Oregon, primarily doing market research stuff, market research and strategy work.
110 degrees there today.
100, brother. Don't even get me
100.
started
That's
on this.
crazy.
At some point, climate change and lighting, there's an intersection, and we're going to explore it. How can we not?
We
But
got
yeah,
to.
folks,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
heat dome, the heat dome is back. Hey, that's me. I think there's going to be a lot of character development revealed along the way. So, Edward, let me kick it back to you, man.
Hmm.
Why don't you share a little bit about yourself to our guests, and then I want to share a little bit of one of the last times, before you and I were talking, when somebody brought your name up to me, and I was like, oh yeah, I know Edward. But you tell the folks who you are.
So, Edward Bartholomew, I've been in the industry about 30 years. I have some very good friends in the industry. I started off in lighting design, and um, prior to where I'm at today, I actually was also working at a utility. And there I was trying to develop programs for lighting and energy efficiency. I thought, with my lighting background, I could help influence that through the utility. Yeah, it was mixed results. So, but again, amazing community around rebates and around utilities. I love those folks, and so it, right now I am doing a lot of, I call it teaching. I'm going to be teaching at Morgan State and also looking at other opportunities to teach as well. I'm speaking with my good friend Mark Loeffler at Light Fair coming up, and really advocating with some really good friends regarding getting more diversity within our industry. What does that look like? And that is actually how this podcast came about, was really talking to the good folks at Get a Grip and exploring the conversation around diversity and how that conversation went. And they felt that it would be nice to have me on with John to continue some of those conversations, but also explore more. So I just want to rest assured this podcast will not be exclusively about diversity, even though it's an important issue for me. We will be covering the range, and I'm excited about some of the topics and friends that I get to bring on and talk to, and as well as talking with John about these hot topics. So that
Yeah,
is
yeah,
who I
absolutely.
am.
Well, we're gonna outline some of those, and thanks for reminding me. We would be remiss not to thank the folks at Nailed, our friends at Get a Grip, Michael and Greg. Thanks for the support. So we're excited to be here, and I want to echo that sentiment. When you and I started this conversation, um, man, you found yourself, whether you knew you were going there or not, all of a sudden you kind of found yourself on the hot plate on an interview talking about diversity issues. Um, I was simultaneously having a conversation with Michael saying, man, uh, if you want to tell me to be myself more on podcasts, I don't want to talk about rebates. I want to talk about real stuff that is going on in the industry. And so kudos to him for bringing us together. Listen, I want to hit the range. I want to highlight some of these things. You said, there's this whole range. It's diversity, and then it's a whole lot more. So why don't you help me unpack this? We have talked, about the shifting value that people put on lighting, or the
Hmm.
value that can be
Hmm.
easily prescribed from
Hmm.
one person. This is what I'm getting out of it. But you've
Hmm.
described, uh, you know, this myriad of different value streams that coexist whether we choose to acknowledge them or not. So I'm talking, it's not just about light levels, it's not just about energy efficiency or aesthetic beauty. It's about, it's health, it's all these things. help unpack that for the listener so they can understand this range.
Yeah, lighting doesn't exist in a bubble. It impacts a lot of different things, and it is impacted by a lot of different things. It's part of society, and absolutely how lighting is utilized by society is critical, and it reflects the values of that society. And one of the things I've been exploring, especially in the recent talk, is looking at how lighting reinforces privilege and power. If you look at any IES awards show, you're going to see basically the most wealthy, most robust budgeted projects gaining awards, and that conversation needs to be explored. We need to interrogate why that happens. So when we look at the different value propositions of lighting enables us both sighted and also some of the hormonal aspects that it triggers. All of those things are coming to light. But who gets access to those things? Who gets access to
Yeah.
beautiful lighting? Who gets access to healthy lighting? Who gets access to, and this is the bottom, usually the lowest common denominator is energy efficiency. They'll throw that everywhere. But they never add in quality. So those
One of the
school
things that's
districts
been
that,
frustrating, school districts. I was thinking
those
the
school
Boys and
districts
Girls
get
Club.
ignored.
I was
Absolutely.
thinking the
Yep,
Boys and Girls
absolutely.
Club.
Yeah.
Look, there's
Yeah.
this
How many projects you
it
worked on?
it
Yeah.
it while obviously like everybody who is listening to this podcast, I feel like understands it's like axiomatic the value of energy efficiency. But
Right.
when energy efficiency is driving the bus, and I'm gonna tell you this too, 99% of people will also say, and we know people experience this cognitive dissonance all the time, but people will also say like, "Hey, I'm about the lighting first, and the energy
Right.
efficiency follows." The
Yeah.
reality is
Whatever. Yeah.
either
Yeah.
either the tail is wagging the dog, or
Mm-hmm.
you know, or actually energy efficiency in many cases has become the engine, especially where rebates are concerned. And you're right,
Mm-hmm.
man. There's not just a disconnect at the award level, what we recognize and choose to say this was important. There's a
It's in the
disconnect.
practice. It's in the whole
Yeah, I mean, all the way
practice.
around.
Absolutely.
It's 360,
Mm-hmm.
man. It's 360. And
Absolutely.
and it's interesting. This is a conversation that we can have later on. I mean, we need a proper guest to represent this point and to help
Oh, we'll have
disagree
somebody.
with
We got
me.
a couple books. Yeah. Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
the runaway train between what utility interests are in achieving a target, you know, a regulated
Enabled,
target.
enabled through the quality products lists.
Yeah, it's so, and
Basically.
hey, we're gonna unpack that. We're gonna unpack that. Hey, all
Yeah.
right, look, what should an award look like if we're gonna recognize?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're not recognizing beautiful lighting, what are we recognizing?
It's I was recently a judge on the IES awards panel, and I served with some wonderful other judges, and one of the things it became apparent for every submission that I saw, including some of the award winners, um, it was apparent that they were incredibly wealthy. There was maybe one or two projects where you can see they're working with not only within a budget, but also serving a greater public purpose, not just for the elite to go to that one private office or that one luxury suite, but it was actually serving a greater public purpose. And and I and I feel that as an industry, who pays attention to awards? It's typically designers and the higher echelon, supposedly quote unquote, of within the design industry. But awards also drive value. What do we value as an industry? And I think for too often we have not really valued projects that really serve um, underserved communities, that serve a greater public need that's out there for lighting, and that can do so in a way that's not only efficient and has high performance, but also brings beauty and vitality to those communities. Now, when we look at healthy lighting and things like that, we immediately think, oh, that's going to cost some money. No one's specking my, tunable white fixtures. I don't know why they're talking about this type of thing. And granted, absolutely, people don't want to spend money on something that's kind of risky and that type of thing. But when we know that the science is confirmed that we can increase student performance, this stat alone, we can increase student performance, test performance through positive lighting, including better, good access to quality daylighting. Why wouldn't we want to do that? So I think in many ways we've only kind of targeted those projects that can afford us, and not to those projects that really need us. And we need to reward and award those projects that really needed us.
Yeah. Instead of, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like a lot of those projects, they get TLEDs kicked into them, and then the narrative they get is that was the best return on investment. So it's interesting to say
Yeah.
there's a problem here when you got a bunch of people who think they're winning. And in
And they're
some levels
winning
they
based on that
might.
metric. That ROI metric is
They're winning
so
based on that metric. That's what, yeah, you
so
just said it.
silly,
You
so
said it.
silly. Yeah.
A lot of people would say that's the metric that matters. I mean, is it whose job is it? Is it the lighting utilities industry? So here's what I mean. Look, school districts across the country are strapped for cash, right? And so I mean, I'm just putting myself, if I'm a facility manager, or if I'm that person with the district who manages big capital projects, um, maybe we need to bring somebody like this on as a guest to say, hey man,
Mm-hmm.
what is it? Is it the 2.5 year or less ROI
Mm-hmm.
that is driving this
Mm-hmm.
project? Or is it like, what would it take to get to this system that is benefiting learning performance? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think they know, John. I don't think they know that systems out there can have that type of impact. Either they don't know, or they feel it's too much of a risky proposition to try that. So they're willing to go with the simple, easy to measure type of intervention, the TLEDs, that type of thing. But they don't know that, if you have a really good lighting system and a good daylighting system, you could make those students actually perform better within these schools. You can reduce behavioral problems in these schools. So you can have better outcomes overall and healthier kids who are sleeping better at night. All of those things
Yeah,
can be enabled.
man. You know
It's
what's so
just
funny?
ignorance. Yeah.
Yeah. Just yesterday, I was talking with a colleague who is a lighting designer with a huge architectural firm, and he shared with me um, they're tech clients. He said, look, the only time I'm ever doing luminaire level lighting controls, I mean the full
Mm-hmm.
shebang, right? He said the
Mm-hmm.
only time I'm doing those is when it is a tech client and that's in their
Mm-hmm.
specification. They know they want it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not
They know the value of that.
code's not
Right.
driving it. Energy
Mm-hmm.
savings isn't driving it.
Right.
They understand the value of control and flexibility. And so he says it's
And
not
it's not about,
a
yeah,
question.
that's key. It's not about energy at all, which is,
And
controls
when the client wants it,
supposedly were, right.
yeah, one of the questions I had for him is I was saying, hey, when you have a common network lighting control system, how often does that get value engineered down? And he was like, oh, maybe 50% of the time. Now, granted, that's the majority of his work and projects, and LLC is a smaller piece of the pie. But when I said, how often do your LLC projects get VE'd, he was like, never, because if it's LLC, the client wanted it. Think about the difference between a tech client. Now, we know there's big money uh, in tech, right?
I'm working for a few right now. Mm-hmm.
Propping up the U.S. economy, people. I'm telling you.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
good for them. Keep doing it.
And they're dealing with exactly some of the same problems. They want to retain those workers. They want to give those workers control of their environment, because people who have control of their environment are typically more alert. They typically work and more productive. That's the bottom line. And controls can enable that. And we all know that lighting is the most obvious type of thing you control. HVAC, I love that people put in fake thermostats for HVAC sometimes to give people the illusion of control. But they don't notice it as much because it's kind of psychological. But except when it's off, and then they absolutely notice it. But lighting is one of those things that has an immediate feedback, and they know that they can impact that. So I could see how that's enabled through tech folks who spend a lot more money probably on their workers in that way. So that makes a lot of
Listen,
sense.
in the way that tech is now leading, like think about the space race, right? That used to be nation states, that used to be government that led that. No, it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's tech now. It's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's Elon Musk, right? It's SpaceX. It's I don't even want
Oh,
to
that's
get
interesting. Yeah.
into
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
where I'm going with this is we often, I think our industry, especially if you're somebody from the utility side, you have looked at codes and standards and how to drive that stuff. But I think big tech might be the new gospel that is driving change that wasn't there
Mm.
in the last sort of, the method of authority gets passed down by the powers that be.
That's an interesting thing, because one of the issues they're having is how do they bring these people back to the office? Is lighting
Yeah.
going to be a method that they could bring people back to the office? And I think in many ways, yeah, I think changing
Hey,
on lighting. I
if
just recently worked on a project, and it was clear that the lighting was one of the dominant, um, regardless of all the furniture changes and things like that, lighting was the dominant method that they were going to use to hopefully invite more people to come back and feel safer. And now, during the age of COVID, that's even more abundant. But I think in general, the entire office space landscape is changing. It's not going back.
oh,
We're not
big
going
time.
back to what we were before. And so lighting can absolutely play a role into creating healthier, better spaces for people to be. But we're going to have to look at homes. So we're going to have to look at their situation at home as well. All of those things need to be impacted. So the office is extending beyond the building itself. It's really extending even into this virtual space.
Yeah.
This is really
Yeah,
our office right
absolutely.
now.
Hey, well, you want to talk about the virtual space? I just learned about the concept of a digital twin, and if you're not familiar with that, people, just look it up on the side.
Yeah,
Don't leave the
yeah.
podcast. Look it up later. Listen, Edward, I want to switch gears. You were talking earlier about the sense of like the flexibility and control, how that can create a comfortable environment, and how much that matters. I want to riff off that, but take it in a slightly different direction. Talking about, speaking of environment, you wrote an essay. I'm going to call it. You wrote a personal piece, and you put it out on LinkedIn called "Observations of a Black Man in the Lighting Industry." And you were really writing about
Part
your
one.
environment.
Part one.
Part one. Part one. All right, I
Yeah.
love it. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So before I ask you to talk about that, I want to start with this. Since we're having awkward conversations,
hmm
uh, can I call you Black, or should I say African American? What's your preference on that? You use Black in the title, but
hmm hmm
why did you
hmm
choose to use Black, I guess, in the title? And can I call you Black?
It, First, yes, you could definitely call me Black, and it's really an interesting phenomenon. One of the things I want to do with that article is really kind of break down the fear factor and the awkwardness that people have, because in many ways, and I acknowledge this, I am probably, for some people, their only Black friend. And I totally acknowledge that's probably what's happening, and in many ways we haven't had those conversations. And as one of the comments under that article said, I don't see you as Black, I see you as my friend. Well, yeah, you don't see me then. You simply don't see me, because that is who I am, and owning that. Instead of saying African American, I own Black, as I grew up at a time where Black is beautiful, Black is power, and it was really about reclaiming our power for that word, and so that has a lot of legacy history to me, owning and claiming that I am Black, and so I don't, I I I love my Black culture, and everything about it, and I think it absolutely influences who I am as a lighting person. So I am a Black lighting designer, and that's who I am.
Yeah, that's great, man. So I gotta share just like a little level deeper. I remember the
hmm
comment that you were sharing, the I don't see you as Black, and I was talking with a mutual colleague of ours, good friend,
hmm
Rena Rasputinus. We can say her name. Hi, Rena,
hmm
up there in Seattle.
Irene,
Keep doing
I
your
love you.
thing. Keep doing your Love you, Rena. Uh, she and I were walking to lunch. This is years ago. And I remember she told me that. She said, "Oh man, there's some stuff happening on the LinkedIn." I said, I think we were walking to lunch. I said,
It had to
"Rena,
be
what's happening
like a
on the
year ago.
social?"
It wasn't years. It was a year ago.
Okay, a
It
year,
seems
a
like
year ago.
years.
Okay, so
Yeah.
things were hot. Yeah, yeah. And she shared that with me. She kind of shared the comment, and I remember thinking in my head, um, man, that poor bastard, he made a mistake in saying that, but I remember myself. I mean, as little as 3 to 5 years ago, I would like that. To me, felt like the progressive position, so to speak. That was something that, like, as somebody who myself is mostly, I line liberal on a lot of issues or progressive on a lot of issues. As a progressive person who would cringe if I heard the N bomb, but I was like, oh yeah, that's the, like, I don't see color. And then it kind of took somebody actually telling me that to be like, oh damn, I get it. Like blind spots, you know? So let me ask this just before we actually get into that article, because I want to talk about that piece a little bit. I want to ask, there's like an inverse corollary here, okay? So if you're a black guy, what would you call me? Am I white? Am I a white guy?
Yeah, but you are a, however you want to identify, and absolutely being the majority culture, you pretty much don't have to define that, and that's a wonderful privilege that you have. Is that majority of the lighting industry, and I have some numbers to back this up. It's like 93% white. So actually 95%. Well, no, 93%. 93% white. Let me go. I think it's 95, and I think there's abundance of Asian. There are very few blacks, very few Hispanic. So so we look at the totality of the industry, and you look at the totality. Um, it's a white industry. It's a white
Yeah,
industry, and
yeah,
it is what it is, and it's been that way for years. That's what was so interesting about Alex Baker's article. The more things change, the more they are more things stay the same, the more things they stay the same. Um, it's just the nature of what we're looking at. So we have not made any headway in having a more diverse industry that reflects the population that we serve.
yeah,
And that's literally the statement that I gave Michael and Greg on Get a Grip. And that's what they were reading. It's like, I just want a more diverse industry. It was a pretty aspirational, innocuous statement. It wasn't even, it's like kind of like, I love uh, Michael Che from Saturday Night Live. He has a great stand-up thing. He talks about, we're just saying Black lives matter. We're not saying they're better. We're not saying that they're superior. Just matter. That's all we're saying. And so,
yeah,
and so it was I think that's an interesting thing. It's like, for being a white designer, you don't think about things in the way that I do. When I walk into a room, I'm typically the only black person. I can tell you from going to many utility efforts, I was the only black person in that room. And there's a lot of money in that room. There's a lot of opportunity in that room. And there were no other black folks in that room. And that I want to change. That I want to have
yeah.
some influence in seeing how we could bring greater opportunity to those populations that simply are not in that room. And if it requires that I stand up, and that's why I wrote the article, if it's my voice, then, and there's no one else saying it, then so be it. That is me. But now there are other folks who are going to step up, and they're going to start speaking out more and more. A good friend of mine who's representing the LGBTQ community is stepping out. Women in lighting have done an amazing job in voicing their concerns, and we need more. So, and I think for those out there who are thinking, oh, why do we need to separate and all this stuff? We're not separating. We're celebrating, we're empowering, and we're bringing in greater diversity into this industry. And the industry does better when that happens. It simply does.
I think for no, well said, well said. So hey, let me come back to this. I do identify as white, so I can be, like call me a white guy on the show. That's how I identify. In some ways, I'm like a consummate white guy.
I
I
don't
live in
see you as
Portland,
white. I
Oregon.
see you as my friend. Sorry.
Hey, I mean, the thing is, when you say that to me, I mean, this is what you were talking about. I heard this line once where somebody pointed out. They said that a really weird thing about power dynamics, is that people who have just a little bit more of power don't feel the differential, but people who have a little bit less power really feel the differential. And if you don't
Mm-hmm.
believe that, ask any second or third or fourth kid.
Mm.
You feel
That's a
me?
great
You
analogy.
feel me?
I
But
feel you. I
that's
definitely
but
do.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's something for me, because I mean, I was like, so when you say I see you as my friend, I was like, God damn, that's sweet, Edward. Thanks, man. Like, I'm in the inner circle. I wasn't like Edward doesn't see me. I was like, of course he sees me. So I mean, so I'm glad we're just setting that tone out there, because I didn't want to get like 4 episodes in and then be like, can I call you black, or like start saying it feeling weird, or like all of a sudden get like, what would have happened is I would have got self-conscious 5 episodes in and then started saying African American, and then you would have called me out.
Oh
We
yeah.
would have had a guest on the
Flipping
show. It
back
would have
and
been a
forth.
nightmare.
Yeah. 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 And I could say that both are fine. And these are the type of conversations. This is the type of people need to hear that, because sometimes you just got to awkwardly go, how do I refer to you? I was talking about you the other day. I didn't know whether to say African American, Black. How do you like to be referred to? Say that to people. Ask them. Have a
Yeah,
conversation with them. It's okay. You're not,
man.
this whole woke, quote unquote woke culture. You're only woke if you ask. If you suddenly start having conversations with folks. If you ignore folks and just, not
Hey,
really bring them into your circle or be vulnerable to these folks, then no, you're not their friend. You are not their friend. You're not. You're simply not.
you hitting the snooze button. I see a lot of that.
Yep.
Like another 15 minutes, maybe I'll have a chance to have this again. Hey, look, that's actually a redeeming thing. Is like, I feel like relationships. I'm gonna use a golf analogy. It's the most white guy thing ever. Where like every hole, there's a lot of stuff like this. Every hole you get to start over. There's a little bit of a freshness to it, and
Mm.
you know, I think a healthy relationship has an aspect of that as well. Any relationship. All right, Edward, man, we're all over the map, but I love this. We wanted to talk about these things. We're starting to get into the range of some of the topics we're going to have. We're going to be bringing on guests who can really speak in depth to some of these topics, right? Yeah. Where else are we going to go? Yeah. Share where else we're going to take this.
I think we're going to have to interrogate some of the assumptions around lighting. One of the biggest assumptions that I think drives a lot of very poor and bad lighting is crime is prevented by lighting. And we're going to have guests on who actually interrogate that and look at that and bring us your facts. Where did that study come from? What are you looking at? And and look at case studies. Has this really worked? What are the numbers that justify this?
Yeah.
Do certain communities get overlit because they are soon to be crime, crime areas? And how does that impact those areas? Do they feel like they're living in a crime scene? Do they not feel, they feel watched but not seen in their own home? How does that make people feel, and how does that make people behave within those environments? So that's something I really would like to interrogate and look at. We have a wonderful guest on looking at even color rendering. Color rendering for lighting has been strictly for Caucasian skin. And what does that look like, and how can we have a more universal color rendering, or even if we go outside of color rendering and look at uh, TM30, and how could that reflect a greater skin tone range and make everyone look beautiful? Or can we change the spectrum depending on the population that's at those places? How do we target it, or do we make it broader? How do we address that? So we'll have a
Yeah,
guest on looking at
man.
things like that.
Hey, it feels like Philips Hue needs to partner with L'Oreal or one of these makeup companies. That's like, we got all
It's a great
shades
idea.
covered. We already been
Absolutely.
there. We already did the R&D. We already, you always say
Right.
I mean, I'm saying that a little bit being
Yeah.
glib, but
No,
hey,
that's
if
brilliant,
that
I think.
happens, I want to cut to the action. So we'll
Well,
come back.
think about all the people who are doing selfies and all this, that generation, they want to look beautiful regardless of their skin tone. And, we could dismiss it and say, oh, that's a kind of a self-conscious thing. That's the world that they're living in. That is literally how they put themselves out to the public. We need to help in that world, or get out of the way. But I think as our lighting expertise can come and support that, let's see what we can do.
Man, I want to go back. I want to go back to like lighting up neighborhoods and stuff, impoverished neighborhoods. I mean, when you were talking about that, my mind was racing to all these different places where that conversation might be having. Um, I was thinking of low income multi housing, and I was thinking about the common
Hmm.
areas. I was
Hmm.
thinking about
Absolutely.
parking lots in those spaces, and how the broader footprint of those spaces are lit. But I was also thinking about
Hmm.
like more neighborhood broadly, especially along what I would call the sort of commercial streets, the main commercial strip,
Hmm.
the way they get lit up.
Hmm.
Now it's not uncommon. I feel like we almost used to live in a world where you had, all the street lights were HPS, but
Hmm.
you would see for security lighting, you would get that 41 or 6500K sometimes, just
Hmm.
gross, so bright, shining down the wall
Yep.
packs and stuff. Now street lights have kind of gone that way, which is a little crazy. That conversation is happening.
Right.
in a major way, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But just kind of bring it back to like help me understand. Is it all those levels? Is it one more than others? And then also like, can somebody be blamed for being like, this is a dangerous neighborhood, we do need to light it up? Or like, how do you light
Mm-hmm.
up a neighborhood?
Mm-hmm.
If we can say
Mm-hmm.
in the same breath that we want women to
Mm-hmm.
feel safe in parking lots, so we need to have
Mm-hmm.
good
Mm-hmm.
light. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if there's this one for one between lighting and safety, then what do you do in neighborhoods that do have higher crime rates and are suffering from like systemic, issues?
The corollary between lighting and crime has never been fully established, and when you start interrogating some of the research on that, you really see some real gaps, and you see some really gross assumptions happening with that. So, but the public, unfortunately, and intuitively, I have to say, thinks that more light reduces things because people are being observed. Um, Unfortunately, it creates almost a doubling down. So you're overlighting some of these spaces. You're lighting for property, you're lighting for crime, but you're not lighting for people, and so that people feel comfortable in those spaces. And it turns out, if you light for people, if you bring more people doing more positive things within those areas, and that positive activity looks different for different cultures. Some people it looks like playing in the playground with your kids. Some people it looks like hanging out, just shooting shit with your friends, stuff like that. So creating positive activities where generations of people are out there enjoying being out and enjoying each other at night
Hmm.
may not require overlighting those spaces or overlighting the buildings and overlighting property, but actually making people feel comfortable and safe in
Oh
those
yeah, yeah, yeah.
spaces.
Maybe having members of the community feel comfortable so that their outside is a way bigger deterrent and way more important to reclaiming the neighborhood and the streets and keeping
Absolutely.
those malign
Reclaiming is brilliant.
activities reclaim. Um, Holy smokes. Okay, dude,
And bringing
we
those
could.
people into the conversation, it's really questioning our expertise status sometimes and bringing citizens in and talking to them, having them educate us about their culture and their neighborhoods, and bringing some knowledge about what we know about lighting, and having that dialogue with folks instead of imposing solutions on
Yeah.
top of them, having them be a part of those solutions and those conversations.
So many roads of I mean, so many roads, so many paths to talk about here. Edward, we gave a pretty good. I mean, we've covered a lot here. Any other highlights we want to hit before we maybe just tease folks and encourage them to keep tuning in and supporting the show? I mean, we've got some fun stuff lined up. What am I forgetting any hot topics?
No, I know that you're going to bring on, you're really interested in really questioning kind of the practice of lighting design, and like, do we support institutions like prisons and places that have a disproportionate number of both black and minority people in them? Do we support working on those projects, and how do we interact with those projects that actually may be detrimental to those communities? So I know you had somebody coming on
Well,
talking
hey,
about that.
that topic I just want to share. I mean, just to hit it at high level, what really blew me away and made me want to have that as a topic was when I said to you, "Hey, Edward, I found this guy, and he really the title was really churched up. I can't remember exactly what the title was, but
Hmm.
it was basically
Hmm.
like lead designer of prisons. I mean, for
Right,
all practical
right.
purposes, this guy designs prisons, the lighting for prisons. But there was this like very, and listen, I'm not writing them off because I honestly, giving people, we give
Oh,
everybody the benefit of the doubt, and so
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
assuming good intent, there was a lot of really flowery language and it was like a lot of positive intent. I'm gonna say like, here's how we make it
Hmm.
better. Here, and I was like,
Hmm.
this is great. This is so important. And Edward, when I brought it to you, you weren't like, oh yeah, these guys are totally. You were like, you, you were like, uh, I'm not working on prisons. You were like, no, no, I don't even want to deal with that dude. It was such a different reaction than mine. So that's why we're gonna get to that.
And there's a lot of architecture firms who are also making that pledge as well. That they don't want to support that prison industrial complex. They don't want to work on those type of projects. But then who gets to work on those projects? They tend
Yeah,
to fall to folks who typically don't have the best interests of anybody, except for
Hey,
getting paid. So
65K every day. I'm just putting in
oh
one
my
type of
god,
light. Hey,
oh
that's
my god,
you,
oh my god.
it's the barbed
Yeah,
wire looks
yeah.
the best when you hit it with that.
Yep, yep. And beyond that topic, I love your idea about, I'm not I'm not anti-Chinese. I'm anti-China, and really looking at the relationship, especially the lighting industry has with China. Who basically supplies most of our products. I think
Dude,
that's a
there's
brilliant
two
topic.
there's two reasons we got to talk about this, and we definitely don't got time now. But folks who have stayed this long, I'm glad you have stayed so you can hear this. There's two things that have got to be addressed in my mind. Number one is there is just a growing. I mean, you kind of teed this one up. There's a growing disconnect between the dynamic, which is the lighting industry is just uh, connected on a fundamental level with China and what's happening with
Mm-hmm.
semiconductors and components right now.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, America as a nation is in its probably most anti-China sentiment pendulum swing that it's been in some
Mm-hmm.
time. And to ignore the very real and obvious, and just like we see this historically all the time, this just
Mm-hmm.
repeats itself. It isn't new to this. We're not like calling
Mm-hmm.
people out like the good old days this didn't happen. No, it's always been like this. When a national sentiment between two nations becomes
Mm-hmm.
diametrically opposed, guess what? People go from being anti-China to I'm anti-Chinese. All right. So I want to talk about that dynamic. And here's the second one. Here's the second one that I think is really fun. I say fun because I'm being glib. I'm saying fun because I have
Mm-hmm.
fun talking with you about this stuff on the show. Uh, One of the sort of defenses I will hear sometimes from white people. Hey, I know the term white people is a trigger for folks. So, like for Caucasians, I don't know. Like one of the triggers I hear for white
Majority
people,
population
or yeah,
in the
or one of
industry.
the sort of defenses I'll hear made. They'll be like, look, obviously racism is wrong. I'm not a racist. Obviously racism is wrong. But they'll be like, but look at these other countries. Everywhere in the world is racist. Everywhere in the world is racist. And one of the things I hear the most, because if you're white and you're trying to talk about race, it's not good optics to talk about it in terms of black and white. So if you can make your racist points with white friends using Asians or like another, like Eastern Europeans would probably be the safest place. I don't know. But like then that way you don't have to deal with like the complexity of the historic with slavery and all that other stuff, right? You can just kind of put it in this box of like people are fundamentally racist at some level. It's happened throughout history. Look, and
Sure.
so there is a modicum. It's like, yeah, there's a modicum of truth to that. There is a lot of racism between these cultures, and racism is a historic truth that is like this just pernicious thread that stays with us in humanity. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and
Our
so
country
why
was
I
was
love,
founded by slave owners, and we were 3/5 of a person. And let's just say that the foundations have been like that, and it has persisted throughout the history. And this country now, when we look at other countries, we're looking at colonialism and how oppressing other folks, that's happening still, to in order to extract goods and extract you know services from them and bring them here and make our stuff cheaper, so that it's cheaper when we get it as consumers. That is absolutely what is occurring and continues to occur. And I think this conversation around China and is brilliant. And yeah.
Asia in general. Here's a little anecdote I'm going to share. When tariffs were being applied and stacked up against China over the last, during the last administration, and they kind of kept going up. A gentleman who I know, oh man, how's business doing? He's a Korean American gentleman, and American citizen, but Korean origin, does business there. And he was sharing, he's like, man, business is booming. All this business that's leaving China is coming to Korea, and I was like, hey, number one, those jobs ain't coming to America. For starts, I mean that's an interesting point we can talk about. But the second thing is, it's like, what really are our values? What really do we care about? Like what are we really trying to get? We want good products. We want good value. Uh, there's just so much to dissect there, and they're
Absolutely.
just the realities of our industry. Um, cheap Chinese crap. Have you heard that before? Have you heard that roll off the
Absolutely.
tongue?
Yeah.
Um,
And
is
I'm
is
looking at
that
you
kind of like
too.
yeah?
I'm looking at you too, Mexico. We know folks are going there. We know what's going on.
So I think
and,
that's going to be a
and
fun one to unpack.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So
All right, man.
I think these are great conversations, and I look forward to more. We're going to be bringing on guests, and we're going to be interrogating them, but also us having, as John says, fun and really kind of exploring some of these conversations. And yes, they'll be a little bit uncomfortable, they'll be a little bit awkward, but I think in general they'll be enlightening as well.
Hey, we want to hear from our friends. We want to hear your ideas for shows. And yeah, thanks everyone for the support. I think that's a great place to hang it up. And Edward, look forward to the next one.
Same here, bro.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Contrast Ratios is financially supported by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to naild.org. Get educated, get associated.